right, good afternoon and welcome to the last session of day one of the Advanced Developer section, track. There we go, Advanced Developer track. This is building your first Azure Cloud Slice lab with me, Brian Bork, and I am the senior solutions engineer at Learn On Demand. Maybe I'm not sure. I could be the solutions engineer. And I'm joined here today with Robert Lasecki, the senior something or other.
Senior software developer.
All right.
Maybe not as senior as you, but
no, definitely not as senior as I am. So we are here to talk to you today, and in an interesting development, and I felt obligated to put this out there. We were tentatively going to schedule or call this session "How to Build Your First Azure Cloud Slice in Time for Soccer Practice," because of our dear leader, Corey, who is probably lost in the wilds of Florida at this time, getting ready for soccer practice. But really, building a Cloud Slice lab, even though we had the complexities of talking about getting your feet wet in Azure, and we're going to be talking about how deep into the weeds you can go with Azure, the actual building of a Cloud Slice lab is not a super sophisticated or complicated thing. And as somebody who contributed to this, Robert, what is something that you would tell every potential lab developer out there that they need to know about getting ready to build a Cloud Slice lab?
Well, the first thing that they need to know is how to set up Azure and how to bring Azure into LOD. Because if you don't have Azure and LOD connected together, you really can't do anything. You need to basically open up your subscription to allow LOD to be able to provision user resources and to be able to tear down user resources. So what it really starts off as is familiarity with Azure, and then also how to bring your subscriptions into LOD.
Right, and that's one of the first things that we're going to talk about, is making sure that that first step is done. So if we can take a look at the slides here, or the slide, this is it. This is really all it takes, all the components that you need in order to be able to get a basic Cloud Slice lab. Now, this may not have a lot of restriction policies, or it may not build a lot of things, but understanding what a subscription is, understanding how a subscription connects into a subscription pool, using that pool in your lab profile to be able to get resources going, and then just basics of making sure you have your virtualization platform set and things like that, and then launch and test. Now, I really advise to people that when you are working inside of lab profiles, we've got some basic tools of the trade, like the completion status and things like that, that we use as notifiers of when something is fixed or when something is ready and is ready to be put into production. So use those tags or use those settings in order to make sure that you're not putting something out there that hasn't been tested. Because one thing that can happen is once something is marked as complete, people think it's ready to go. And you always want to keep it in development until it's really ready to go. So that's it. It's a couple of checkboxes. It's a couple of things, but the devil here is in the details. And some of those details can be a little bit tricky to get to. So it's always important to make sure that you understand where you're getting those things from. Tying together our sort of introduction to Azure or cloud services. Now we're going to talk about Cloud Slice, and then we're going to have the even more in-depth deep dive into how you can really take a Cloud Slice and really manipulate it and control it.
And still get to soccer practice on time.
So let's take a look at what this looks like. Now, before we get started, we're going to do a basic guided tour of how we do a Cloud Slice lab, and we're going to also refer to our excellent online help. And for those people who haven't seen our online help yet, you really should see it, because everything that we're talking about here is described there. It's not an elaborate, you don't have to have us hold your hands in order to build a Cloud Slice lab once you follow these basic rules. Now, earlier, Robert and Kirk did the intro to cloud, and that has already been recorded and already done live. But coming tomorrow, first thing in the morning, we're going to be doing the advanced cloud slice. And is that you and Kirk again? Or is that James and Kirk?
I think that might be me and Kirk.
Okay.
I'll have to check.
Yeah. So he's the guy. He really
Are you
is.
the one in charge of scheduling?
I am. I am the one. I think Corey said that I was somehow responsible for that, and I just didn't pay attention. You know how I don't listen. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. And let's. We're actually going to start with the first part of this, and we're going to talk about the help. We're going to talk about how you find the help, and then we'll go ahead and actually do the build. But the thing that I wanted to show here is anybody who works inside of Lab on Demand has this help available. This isn't just for Cloud Slice, but it is extremely helpful in Cloud Slice in the fact that there are some very specific things that you need to get as far as subscription and subscription pools go. So when you click on help, it brings up a separate page. Now I'm going to make this full screen, even though that isn't the best way of viewing it, just because I want to make sure that you're focusing your attention here. But what I have already done is done the first part. I have clicked create a lab profile. And then when you're inside of a lab profile, there are several things that you can do. Now, we're going to be talking about most of these things tomorrow when we talk about what's new in lab development or in increasing your skill set. But if you scroll down to the bottom, and I just need, whoops, I'm actually not on the home page. There we go. When you go to the home page, you will see our quick start guide, and there's even a section of this that is exactly what we're talking about, building your first Cloud Slice lab. And you'll notice here that there's even sort of a timing involved. And Robert, is this an overestimation, or is this pretty accurate to the amount of time that it actually takes to do these steps?
It actually looks pretty accurate. If it's the first time running through Azure and you don't know where to click to find certain things, it could take you a little bit longer. If you're very familiar with Azure, it's not that difficult to get through because you're already familiar with how to get to each section. If it's your first time getting into Azure, it might take a little bit longer, but overall, it's actually pretty accurate.
Excellent. So, and each one of these is a link, which then takes you to more information about how you get these things going. And in this particular case, we have a link here specifically for Azure. And then here are the pieces of information you need. Now, the cool thing about this is that if I put this back to this size, and now whoops, sorry. Let me put this over here and then put this here. Now we have turned building a lab into a lab. And that's exactly how it's designed to be. You don't need extra information up there. You don't need to contact help. Right here is how do I do this one thing? And so I go in and I go, all right, I got to create a new application in Azure. And then I go in here and I say, all right, now I've got to go into the Azure portal, and I open up the portal. I use my account. I do all of the things that is specified here. So while it is tricky, and while there are a couple of components to it, it's really not a difficult process, especially after you've done it once or twice. So that help is available to you. And again, it's we've talked about it being quick, self-service oriented, and it is designed to get you up and going pretty quickly. So because I was in Create a Lab Profile, when I clicked on the help link up here, that is what actually gave me the fact that I was inside of a Create a Lab Profile. So it started me off on Create a Lab Profile. If you're ever like, all right, I need to know how to create a lab profile, but I'm interested in creating Cloud Slice, then just go to the home page and then, oops, right there, the home page, and then scroll down, and you're going to be able to get to the guides that you need for the step-by-step instructions. Now, there is one other thing that I want to put up here on the help, because we've been promoting it a couple of times, and I want to make sure that I'm doing it again, and that is our help center, our help desk. And if you click on contact, you will see how you can reach out and communicate with us, including that self-center help center, which is, or self-service help center, which gives you access to articles that we have and things like that. But if you scroll down, you have the ability to file a technical service ticket, which will get you immediate help. Otherwise, we have email, we have Skype, we have phone numbers, including international numbers. And you can see here that it will even allow you to just go ahead and click on it. And if you've got a VoIP style phone, it'll actually even dial for you. Oh, the cool thing about this is our staff is there 24/7 to be able to answer. Robert, we keep him chained to a desk most of the time. Yeah, in the basement. And he is at a desk and answering questions. Now, he isn't there, but our team is there 24/7, 365. They have no Christmas. Yeah, there's real, actual human beings. So it's really, really nice to have that functionality there. All right. So now, what does it really take to get Cloud Slice? Well, first of all, there's a subscription, not a subscription pool. You don't start with a subscription pool. You start with a subscription. So I'm going to actually open up admin in a separate tab here. And the cloud services box that you see here is very important for this particular function. You need to have a cloud subscription. Even if it's only one subscription, you still put it into a pool. Now, Robert, why is it called that?
So a subscription pool is a collection of one or more subscriptions. And even if you have a single subscription, putting this into a pool allows you to kind of decouple your subscription from your lab profiles. So for example, if you have 5 or 10 lab profiles that reference the same cloud subscription pool, you can easily move new cloud subscriptions in and out without having to go through each and every of your lab profiles and make that change. So you make the change in one place and it affects everything globally. So you have a management benefit there as far as just managing your lab profiles. The other benefit is if you have a situation where you only have a resource limit of 20 VM cores and you need something like 40, you can use multiple subscriptions, and when the labs launch, they will distribute across the multiple subscriptions in the pool. So you're taking all of your subscription resources and you're pulling them together, so when every time there's a lab launch, it's going to find the best one to put it in, and it's going to automatically take care of the rest for you.
Now, did you guys talk about the how subscriptions do get limited in the previous section?
We talked about the concepts briefly, but we didn't really go into details exactly what the process of getting those bumped up is like. But basically, you go into your Azure subscription, which is the Microsoft Azure portal, and you go to help and you open up a ticket, and there's an option for increased subscription resource limits. So you just pick the region that you're interested in, and you submit a ticket. And I mean, usually it takes roughly several hours for them to approve it. There are some cases, if you're going to go through and request 5,000 simultaneous machines, they might have a little bit of a problem with that and say, well, it's going to take us a couple of weeks for us to get that hardware up and running, or they may recommend running in another region or distributing across multiple regions. So there's always options. And this actually applies to if we're doing any other cloud hosting too, such as AWS. There are also restrictions there too as far as subscription limits. And that's something you always want to consider, no matter what cloud platform you're using.
Great. So let's start with a cloud subscription. And when we talk about cloud subscription, we are talking about a single connection to your various cloud technology. So in this particular case, we have the Career Rocket organization. We have them working with a certain organization, and then we've got the other key component here, which is the subscription and subscription ID and authentication, storage, and all the other kind of stuff. So if we need to set this up for the first time, and I'm not going to set all of these up from scratch because I'm going to be reusing some of this, but if I did want to set this up from scratch, just to give you an idea of what you need to do, when we go to cloud subscription and we say create cloud subscription, you'll notice that we're specifying the platform, the 2 platforms that are available right now. Now, when we're working with cloud subscription, we typically are working with cloud slicing, but that isn't the only time that we use subscriptions, is it?
It is not. There are some cases where we might launch virtual machines or have a collection of machines that are managed VMs within LOD. So in some cases, if you want the user to be able to log into a virtual machine just like they would a Hyper-V machine or machine that's launched in our data center, where you can actually see the desktop and just log right in, you can use Azure for that as well. So you do not need to limit it to specifically cloud slicing. Now what you can do is you can do a managed VM and cloud slice and then use all the things, which is a lot of fun. So
it's a lot of fun, but there's additional cost associated with that.
Of course, yes.
So it always comes down to what's the word I'm looking for? I keep wanting to say association, but that's not correct. There are compromises that typically have to be made between the costs of running resources in Azure and doing a cloud slice to reduce those costs. But sometimes you do one thing, sometimes you do another thing. The beautiful thing about this is with your cloud subscription and then the follow-up, the cloud subscription pool, you can then have those things set up and ready for you to go. So in this particular case, you see here that I've got my name and I've got my subscription ID. Now, why is the subscription ID not required, but the name is?
Well, in some cases, the subscription ID may not be required if you're using AWS. So AWS doesn't exactly have the concept of a subscription ID, and it's not necessarily required for the same level of automation. They have something called an account ID, but we don't really need to track that. We just use the application registration, basically.
And this subscription ID is usually a fairly long...
It is what you call a GUID, and
yes.
It looks like a bunch of random letters and numbers, and the best thing to do is just to go into your Azure subscription, and you hit the little copy button, you go over to LED, and you just hit paste, so you don't have to memorize it.
Right. So if I show you here the example one that we have, this is the subscription ID right here in blue. All right. So let's talk about some of the other things. Now, you notice here that it says the cloud subscription pool, but you may not know that yet. It may not be set up yet. But you could actually just kind of direct deposit this into an already existing cloud subscription pool at this point.
Well, actually, what I like to do is I like to go and create my cloud subscription pool, and within your cloud subscription detail screen, you can start to create and add subscriptions right there.
Right.
So you don't need to worry about jumping back and forth. This is just another way to get to the same place.
Right. Exactly. So if I click on choose here, I would have to choose one that exists, and we have one out here called Career Rocket, and I would be able to put this in that pool as I was building it, or I could be in the pool and then create a subscription at that point.
It's exactly the place to be, right? In the pool.
In the pool, yes. Right now that'd be good, although my hair would get frizzier. So your owner name and owner email is obviously very good and very important for you to be able to keep track of. And I love this additional feature. It is always a good idea to think about, am I going to need to expire this subscription? Not that because I believe that it's going to not be used, but because it gives you a way of being able to limit that subscription for a certain amount of time. You may want to just set it up for a month of use, if you're setting up a demo or a test or something like that, or a couple of days of use or something like that. But ask yourself, am I going to need to have this subscription? Because there's more to a subscription than just a subscription ID. There's also the storage locations and the other pieces of information. So this is not something you typically set up for a very short temporary time, but it is something, and it's really nice to have the functionality to be able to put in the expiration.
Yes. I should also add that the owner name and owner email is optional, and we are adding features today that start to leverage the owner email field, where now we're going to do something called a subscription health check. And it's going to look at your subscription and verify that everything is healthy and that there's nothing going wrong. Because let's say, for example, Microsoft suspends your subscription for any number of reasons. It could be suspected abuse, like if somebody gets on there and they start launching machines that they're not supposed to or something, or if your credit card expires and it's no longer charging back to the credit card, or you run out of balance, Microsoft will cancel your subscription. So what will happen is when this health check occurs, it will detect that your subscription is expired or at risk of being expired, and it will send you a message. And that's something that we're planning to get out in the next couple of weeks. So even though currently the owner email is not required, putting it in there is always beneficial because you will gain the benefits of having that in there later.
Absolutely correct. So that gives you the expire date and time. Then we have our authentication. Now, authentication can be a little bit tricky because you have .onmicrosoft.com.
Yes.
But that isn't the whole story.
That is not the whole story, no.
So what do we put in here?
That is basically what you call a tenant name. It's like a domain name.
Right.
And this is something that you create in your Azure Active Directory. So just like when you have an Active Directory, you have a domain name of some sort, and it has to be unique for your Active Directory. What this is going to do is this is not only going to be used for authenticating to your Azure subscription, but it's also going to be used to create the user accounts that your users are going to use to log in, or what we call the cloud portal credentials. So you can do a custom tenant name, but that's something you have to configure in Azure Active Directory.
So do I have to put .onmicrosoft.com or not?
No, you do not. It can be, if you control, robertlasecki.com or Learn on Demand Systems or Lab on Demand, you can put that in there as long as you've configured it to work in Azure Active Directory. So in Azure AD, there is a section you can go to and you can add a custom domain name. So whatever your domain is for that Active Directory is what you would use in this case. And typically this screen, you would find all the settings for in the Azure Active Directory and application registration section of Azure AD.
Okay. So just to give you an idea of what we're talking about here, if I go to it's azure.microsoft.
You could do portal.azure.com.
Okay. That's one. You can tell how often I type this. If you were to go in here now, in this particular case, I am looking at accounts that already exist, but I'm going to choose a slightly different one. This is my personal one. And I just want to show it as an example. I don't want to actually use it to set up the subscription. But if we can show the concept of where these fields are, because again, this is 20 minutes. Everything else that we're talking about are little 5-10 minute slots. So
absolutely.
This is very important. So if I were to look here, where am I going? What am I looking for?
So just to kind of take a step back here,
okay.
What we're doing is we're actually giving LOD permission to kind of work within your Azure subscription.
Correct.
So the reason we need the tenant name, the reason we need the client or application registration is because LOD needs to be able to impersonate an administrator to be able to do everything that it needs in Azure Active Directory and Azure. So where we would go in this case is we would, on the left-hand side, this is a dynamic menu. Mm-hmm. So if you do not see Active Directory in there, you can hit the All Services button. I would recommend adding it to your favorites if it's not in there. But you'll see it says Active Directory if you scroll down about midway.
I saw that.
You can also search for it there. Sometimes it's a little bit easier.
I thought you were telling me to go there. I just want to make sure that I'm doing it the right way.
2 ways to get to the same place.
That's right. There's many ways to get to the same place. So here's an example of the domain name, right?
Yeah.
I've got my Brian Azure demo, and that is .onmicrosoft.com. Now, do I have to put that full domain name in there, or do I just put Brian Azure demo?
You should put the entire domain name in there.
Great.
And you can also change that if you want. If you have a .com or .biz or .info, you can always add that stuff in using the appropriate settings within Active Directory, which there's a lot of help documents on.
Right. So again, you can just actually copy this and then go back into your cloud subscription and paste.
There you go.
And there it would be set. Now, what about these two? Because this is the one.
Those are the complicated ones.
These
right?
are the complicated ones.
I should say.
Scary ones. Now, I'm not saying that we have to do this, but I do want to give them an idea of where they would go to look for these.
Absolutely, yes. So the application ID is another big scary GUID because developers, they just love their GUIDs. And the application secret is something in Active Directory you only get once. You create a key, and it'll show it to you as soon as you leave that page. It's gone. So you can either put it in a key vault or you store it in LOD. But once you do that, if you want to be able to create another application secret, you have to go back to Active Directory and you have to create a new one, which is the proper way to manage these keys so they're not leaked or used elsewhere. So in this case, getting the application ID and application secret, the first step would be to create an application registration in Azure Active Directory. So if you go back to Azure Active Directory, you will see there's a icon for app registration. and you just simply click that, and you click New Application Registration at the top. Now, this is going to ask you what you want the name of your application registration to be. And you can name it whatever you want, but I like to name it LOD, because this is the LOD application's permission set to be able to work within your subscription. So whenever you see that, you can say, okay, well, this is LOD working within the subscription. Or that works too, whatever you like. Does
it have to be unique?
It does not have to be globally unique, but as far as within your subscription, it probably should be unique. If you have multiple instances, you want to be able to keep track of what's doing what within your subscription. So I would recommend coming up with a decent naming convention for all of your application registrations. But realistically, you should only have one LOD application registration.
Just to be on the safe side, I'm going to make a second one because I may already have one out there.
There you go. So you're going to have it set up for app and web API.
Mm-hmm.
And then your single sign-on URL, it's not something we utilize, so it can be set to localhost if you wanted to.
Okay.
Or just a default setting.
Localhost is fine.
May require you to do HTTPS.
Okay. Okay.
Has to be a link.
Oh, that's right, because it's a URL.
Yes. And if you have some specific need for it to be something else, you can always do that, but we don't utilize it for logins.
Okay.
All right. So now, you should,
Yeah.
At this point, you have to click outside of the box to do validation.
All right.
So you click create, and
Yep.
it should be real quick. It should be almost instant.
Yep.
And when this happens, the next thing that you want to look at is we're going to go through creating keys. There's also permissions that need to be set up.
Mm-hmm.
But first, we're going to set up the keys because that has to go into LOD first.
Right.
So if you scroll down, you'll see it should say, what is it? Go up a little bit more. I believe it's access keys or keys, or I'm sorry. Click on app registrations again. And you may have to, yeah.
Okay.
Now try click enterprise applications.
Okay.
And it should show up in there.
Yeah. I told you I have
There
one.
we go. You already have one. So just click on LOD Brian. And in here, now that you're actually selecting the application registration, what happened before is after you create the application registration, you have to go back and select it to say, okay, it's created. Now I want to actually view the properties. So in here, you should see a couple different options. One of them is going to be, scroll down, keys, I believe, or well, permissions is one of them we have to do. But
someone called keys.
Yeah, I think, okay, so there's enterprise application options and there's the regular application registration. But let's look at permissions.
Okay.
So currently we have nothing assigned.
Right.
And there is a process for going through and adding subscription level permissions to your application registration, which that's going to be in what's your subscription permission setting. So that's actually going to be in the subscription side of the house.
Right.
So let's just go and revisit the keys and see if you can go back up to overview.
Overview.
And then at the top where you see that little
Up here?
crumb trail, yep, just click on, there you go. Click on app registrations. See if we don't get it in there. Okay, all right.
Do I have to go to the application console?
Now, it should be, I believe it's either going to be in application registration or enterprise application. But going to enterprise applications and going to the LOD application you already had registered,
Okay.
that should have your key settings. We'll just go to the one above that.
Oh, okay.
And it won't actually display your keys, so don't worry. You know, it's not going to leak your passwords.
Nobody take my keys, darn it.
Yeah.
All right. Sorry, I accidentally clicked on the wrong thing twice. There we go. So here I am, and
Click on
I'm
the LOD one.
Oh,
Or
the LOD.
fine.
That's
Yeah.
right. You wanted to see this one because I already had it.
Yes. And typically, depending on how your subscription's set up, you should have a keys option in here. Try click on properties.
Okay.
One of the most difficult things about Azure is the frequency that they update things in the UI. So that does give you a bit of work to do as a content developer, constantly updating. But basically what you would see when you get to this screen, try and scroll down on the center pane.
Oh, the center pane.
Yeah. And you should see something that says keys or security keys. And what that has is a section where you can generate a new key, and you give it a name, you click generate, and then it shows the key. And then as soon as you get that key, you want to save it.
Right.
And save it directly in LOD. If you want to store it somewhere like a password vault or a key vault, just be careful where you're putting it because it does give the holder of the key API access to your subscription. So that is somewhat critical. Just making sure that you protect your keys. So once the keys are done, you would go back to LOD and then paste in whatever your key is.
Right. Yeah, I would put that key or the secret under the secret.
Exactly. Right in the application secret
And the
section.
application ID, is that this?
That is it, yes. And just click the copy button so you don't accidentally type it wrong or misplace it.
Now, keep in mind, I'm doing this from an already created one. And I had the benefit of having Robert help me when I set this one up. So I do actually have a recording of that key in a text document on my work machine at home. I don't have it here, but I have it on my work machine at home. Now, I'm not going to take you through every single thing that you need to do here because again, we have a guide that will take you step by step through all of this. But what I really wanted to show is there is a marriage between LOD and Azure that has to be arranged in order to make this get going. But once that happens, from that point forward, everything is really in LOD, right?
Yes, absolutely. And that's true for any cloud hosting provider that you use. That would be the same for AWS if you're doing the virtual machine deployments through that, or if you're using Azure. That won't change. The process is very similar between the two. It's still an application registration, but the process of going through the portal varies.
So if we had this correct, and I'm just going to click on this and allow access, and then I'll paste here in my ID. There it is, and then I'm just going to put that in and pretend that's correct.
It's probably better you don't reveal your application secret on screen anyway. So
hey, there you go. My question is this: when I go into this cloud subscription, why don't I have an edit button here?
For your cloud subscription?
Yeah.
Well, because you need to go to the pool to edit it.
Exactly. And so it's important to note that when you make a subscription, you're really making a instance of something. And then in order to work with it at that point, after that point, you really have to work essentially from a different location. So I want to make sure that we're being as forthright as we can be with everybody. All right, so I was creating a cloud subscription. I'm not going to go through all of the things.
We'll just go back to storage.
But we just go back to storage, and then I would Control-V it there.
Yes, and if we're using the same storage account for our instances, now the nice thing about the way this is set up, if you have containers on another subscription, like say for example, you have awesome VHDs and you're paying for the storage, but I want to run a lab, and I'll pay for my own instance storage. Then we would put your storage account for the templates and mine for the instances. So I'll be billed for the instances and you'll be billed for the templates.
Do I have to have two different subscriptions in order to make that happen?
You can, absolutely.
Or you can do it the other way.
And as long as the other subscription allows LOD into it, it can generate its own storage keys and work out the path to get to them.
And that application that we made is what gives LOD permission into it.
Yes, absolutely.
So, all right, so let's take a look at one that is already pre-built. Now, I don't want to go into our secrets or anything like that, but if we take a look at our, hold on one second, open a new tab and go to our cloud subscription pool, because remember, there were two of those. And you notice that we have this subscription here, this cloud subscription. And this is what Robert was talking about at one point, of you come in here and you can just create a cloud subscription right inside of your cloud subscription pool. Remember, a cloud subscription pool is one or more. It doesn't necessarily mean multiples. You could do it with just one.
It's like a pool party for subscriptions.
You've been waiting for that one, haven't you?
Yes.
That's excellent.
For weeks.
So here's an example. I'm going to skip over the real specifics here, but you'll notice that we've got Rocket Slice Storage, we've got our resource group, our different accounts that we have here, and again, without the secret, that doesn't mean that you can connect. So I'm going to kind of go with that. But that was the basics of the cloud subscription. Once you've got the subscription, you have to put it into a cloud subscription pool. Now, the cloud subscription pool itself is very simple. It is a name. It is linked with an organization, in our case, Career Rocket, whether or not it is enabled. Now, the block lab launches when no subscriptions are enabled. Because this is a pool, and because it might be one or more subscriptions, if that subscription for some reason is expired or is canceled or something like that, what is this actually going to do?
So let's say, for example, you put 3 subscriptions in your pool and you set that expiration date, or you went through and you disabled all your subscriptions, but somebody came and launched a lab. Well, now none of your subscriptions are available. And actually, I'm going to correct myself. What I said before was 1 or more subscriptions, but you can have 0 or more subscriptions in a pool. So you can have an empty pool. But whichever scenario comes up, you want to display something to the user. You don't want to just have a failed lab launch. So what you can do is you could say block the lab launch and display a message, and it could be your own message. If you don't enable this, it'll say something along the lines of, it could not find a subscription to deploy the lab on. There you go. So this will display a custom message.
Right.
Otherwise, it'll allow the lab launch to take place, and it'll show them the user. And this is great for if you're debugging and you want to see what those errors are. But if you're going to have an environment where you have a potentially expiring pool, you're probably going to want to put something in place to be able to display to the user.
Perfect. And then our cloud subscription, we would just say add, or in this particular case, we would create, and we can put additional cloud subscriptions in place.
Actually, I'd like to kind of talk about some of the options you have here.
Okay.
Because you see create cloud subscription. Just click that real quick. And what you'll see is something very similar to the screen that we were looking at before, where you can just be in your pool and just add like 5 subscriptions all at once. You don't have to keep flipping back between tabs. It just makes management a little bit easier. So if you exit out of this, there's also 2 other options. One is edit. And if you click edit, you'll notice that all your settings for that subscription are here. And you can make changes to multiple subscriptions, which could be attached to multiple lab profiles. So now you have a central place to manage all your subscriptions. And then the last one is move. So what that is going to do is it's going to allow you to pick another cloud subscription pool and move your subscription to another pool. So say, for example, you decide, okay, I want to split my subscription into 2 pools for some management reason or for any number of reasons. Now you can just migrate your subscriptions to another cloud subscription pool, which may be attached to another series of labs or even
organizations.
Organizations, yeah.
And it retains all of the locations and all of the keys and all of the other stuff as being in there. All right. So once you've gotten to this point, and again, we've got a Career Rocket already set up. Now, I'm going to be, I know this sounds cliched, but the hard work is really done.
Oh, at this point, absolutely.
Because your storage is specified, your account is set up, your subscription is okay. Now you're going to start dividing this up and giving it to people. And that's the hard part that people sometimes, when I say people, I mean lab developers. Lab developers are people too.
So they
just
say.
Not code developers or programmers. They're not people, right?
Maybe not.
Now we have to get out of the head of, all right, I have a subscription, especially for those Microsoft programmers or lab developers out there. I've got programming on my head now. Those people who do Microsoft labs have a tendency to get sort of focused on trial accounts. And I want to be clear, this is not about trial accounts. This is about making sure that you are splitting up a subscription, and a trial account or a trial pass or that kind of stuff is typically needs to be turned into a subscription and then can be used as a subscription in your subscription pool once you've redeemed that pass, but it's not the same thing. There is a difference between an Azure pass and a subscription or subscription pool.
Yeah, as far as the pooling is concerned, there's definitely a difference, but also with just the difference between an Azure pass and a cloud slice, I always like to use the analogy of pizza since we're talking about slices here.
Yeah.
The Azure pass is like giving somebody the entire box of pizza, where an Azure cloud slice is like giving them a slice of the two. As far as pooling is concerned, you can put Azure passes or redeemed Azure passes or just standard pass codes into a cloud subscription pool. Right.
Exactly. And the beauty is that you make sure that everybody who gets a slice gets what they want on their slice.
Exactly. That's a pretty awesome pizza.
That's an awesome pizza. If you got a box of pizza and it had a slice of pepperoni and a slice of all veggie and a slice of gluten-free and all that kind of stuff, all within one box of pizza, that would be a pretty amazing.
It's almost like trying to order pizza for LOD, right?
That's right, because we are very demanding. So I'm back in my Create Lab profile, and at this point, we have taken you through the subscription process, the subscription pool process. Now we're going to talk about what you need to do in order to actually get CloudSlice to do anything. We have the subscription already set up, and we're going to use that subscription inside of an already existing subscription pool. But what do you have to do as a lab developer? Because if you look at my screen, you will see that I've got networks and virtual machines and stuff like that. And I want to be very clear. All I did was click on create a lab profile. And when I click on a lab profile, it takes me here. So why am I seeing all of this when that stuff isn't really involved in cloud slicing?
Well, it gives you options because in some cases you may want to do a hybrid lab, which has a virtual machine in Hyper-V or even a virtual machine in Azure and a cloud slice in addition. But you have the options to work with it. It's kind of like a painter's palette. You have a lot of colors at your disposal, and depending on what your objectives or the picture you're trying to paint for your lab, you can select whatever you need. And that can be a challenge sometimes, but we are working on some really awesome tools to assist with that.
So the reason I bring this up is because there's one checkbox or one drop down or one box that will change this to be much more accurate. Remember, we're focusing on CloudSlice here. Some of the hybridization and other advanced topics will be covered in a different section. So it's under virtualization platform, and that's really what's steering the stuff that we're seeing on the screen. So if all I want to see is what I'm going to do or what I need for cloud slicing, if I change this virtualization platform to Azure, that's going to fix it, right?
Oh, absolutely. It'll remove all the features that you probably won't need or just the ones you can't use.
Except I still see networks and virtual machines.
Yes, and that gets into hybrid labs.
That gets back into hybrid labs. And the reason I did that is because you would have thought, as a lab developer, I just need to set it to Azure. But in fact, what we're doing for a true cloud slice, or just cloud slice only, is we're actually going to set it to none. Now, it does still show the exam and advanced, because advanced isn't going to go away because we need that for other aspects of the lab interface itself. And is exam, until sometime in the future, is still going to be contained here. But now we only have the basic information and the cloud. So all of the basic information is going to be the same. Notice here that I'm leaving my development status as in development. I want to do that until I've tested my lab, launched my lab, done what I need to do in order to make sure that this thing actually performs. So I'm going to leave it as in development. I have all of this other information in here, as well as whether or not it has instructions. By default, when you create a lab profile now, it has instructions checked automatically. In my particular case, I'm going to uncheck this box because I don't need instructions coming up because I'm not going to be working with instructions, and I'm more concerned with the resources tab and what it comes up with than the instructions. But we've had a couple of sessions, and we'll have a couple more sessions on how to work with IDL and IDLX to be able to really take advantage of that. So don't uncheck that box for normal labs. I'm just not using it in this particular case. There are other fields that I normally fill in, but where all the magic happens as far as Cloud Slice goes is under our Cloud tab.
Yes.
Now, Cloud Credential Pool, we talked about subscriptions and subscription pools, right?
Yes.
So is a Cloud Credential Pool and a Cloud Subscription Pool the same thing?
They are completely different. A cloud credential pool is when you want to issue one-time use credentials to a user.
Right.
Where a cloud subscription pool is the one that you want to use to subdivide or distribute your labs across an Azure subscription.
Right. So when you're doing Cloud Slice, don't worry about Cloud Credential Pool. Worry about the shared subscription pool as far as it. So if you're looking for keys, don't look for credential, look for subscription. But notice that our cloud platform that is listed here is Azure or none. Yes. If I set it to none, and I just want to make this clear, if I set it to none, you can do some really, really interesting things that are not Cloud Slice, but give you the ability to teach somebody any web-based technology, including our own labs, I might add,
Yes.
inside of a lab profile. So you could use a lab profile as a means of putting a set of instructions to a web page. So if you have a company portal that's accessible from the outside world, you could set up a set of instructions on the basic information page that goes to the orchestration of none, and then put your company portal as the cloud portal URL, and then give them the ability to be able to launch that and be able to work with it. There are some pretty phenomenal things. But in our case, we're talking about cloud slicing, which at this point is using the Azure portal. Now, we still have to put in our shared subscription, which I mentioned we already have. So I'm going to choose the Career Rocket and put it in place. Now, we have two other elements. Now, if I clicked on save, I'd have a launch button, but I really wouldn't produce anything.
Yeah, you would basically have nothing to actually push into your subscription.
Right.
So you need to create user accounts and cloud resource groups.
Right. So in our case, we're going to create one user account, and we're going to make them the owner of a resource group. Okay? So in that case, I'm going to click on portal, and notice that, a user account, portal user account, and it comes up with user one. Now, not everybody wants to use user one, because this is what's going to be augmented at the beginning of every name that is going to be uniquely generated for every student in the class. So you're going to have user 1-00335555, and I'm going to have 01-131112. And I don't know if those are the right links, by the way. I'm just
Close
making
enough.
them up.
We'll go with that, yes.
But there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that it's not easily identifiable. So what else do we need to do?
Well,
could we do?
Yeah, we should probably rename the prefix to something interesting like Bob or
Perfect.
Frank or.
Do I need a dash?
You do not need a dash. No,
That's right.
It will do it automatically if it decides that it needs it. You can also use multiple accounts.
Yes.
You don't have to be limited to one, and that's really great for if you want to demonstrate how to do permissions between different user accounts. You can set up one resource group that has permissions to resource group A and B, and then another user that has permissions to just B, right?
Right.
And then you can instruct the user on how to go through and assign permissions to a user. So you can actually use the multiple users within one lab launch to demonstrate to students how to do things like modify permissions.
Yep. Now, again, that'll be more advanced. But
Yes.
if you guys bear with me, you're going to see here that this is going to be really, really quick. The next part is the resource groups. And while we have very sophisticated capability with resource group, it's also very easy to create a resource group. And you just click on it, and you specify your region, and you see lots of different region choices here. Now, some things are not available in all resources, or not all resources are available in all regions.
Yes.
Sorry, is what I meant to say. So make sure you choose the correct region. If you try to launch something that is not available in a region, you will get a message.
Yes.
So I'm going to leave that alone. And you notice that my name prefix, once again, is something that doesn't really mean anything. So I might want to call this, I don't know, Web 1 or something like that. And in this
Resource
case,
group one's nice.
nah, all right. How about RG1? It's
There
at
you
least smaller.
Yeah.
All right. Now, you're going to talk about templates. You're going to talk about
it's more
restriction
advanced
policies later on. But the one thing that you do want to do is, if you've created a resource group, which gives you the ability to be able to log in and do things, you need to assign a user account to that resource group, so that when it spins up and gives you your access, it's giving your user account the correct access. So we click on this, and by default, do you typically want somebody as owner, or do you typically want them only as contributor in order to make changes to their resource?
Well, I leave contributor by default typically, and just because you don't always need to give owner over everything, but it really depends on what you're looking for. They have a lot of resources on what each permission role offers. So you want to kind of go into it knowing what you're doing. But since we're just going to, we're going to create an empty resource group and give that user a sandbox to play and say, create some stuff. We're just going to give them contributor for now, because we're just contributing to it, and select the user Bob.
Yep.
Bob, contributor access.
Now, I want to be clear here. This isn't one user you're giving it. What you're saying is, it is when this creates the Bob00133 account, it is going to give them contributor to the automatically spun up or the newly spun up resource group. So it's creating the user account, creating the resource group, linking them together with that permission, and giving it to the end user.
And just importantly, it is going to tear down that user account.
Yes.
And
tear down that
the
user account and resource group.
Yes.
Right. So at this point, I'm done. And I really, I want to stress that in less than an hour, we have gone through and not only talked about the sort of theory behind this, but we have.
That's fine. Just hit OK.
Resource group has no users. All right. We have a Cloud Slice Lab that is available, and it should start pretty quickly. You notice that it says, whoops, there we go. Get started. That's what I wanted. And here is our Cloud Slice. It's not elaborate. It doesn't have anything, but notice that it has my Bob account. It has a user for that Bob account, although that, or it has a password for that, which has all sorts of goofy characters in it, yes, which I wouldn't want to type because you've seen me type.
Yeah.
But if I click on use another account, by the way, this is not, this user account selection is not going to be the same for your students, although it could be, because it is based on whether or not they said, I want to save my logins. So that's why all of these are listed here. But always tell your students or end users to click on use another account and then put in the information that comes over on the side here. So if I click that and then I do a Control V and do next, and then I click this and do a Control V and sign in, and I'm not going to save it for this site. You get this message that pops up like you are brand new to Azure, because you are. This has never existed before.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so maybe later, and notice I've got my user account in the upper right hand corner. I've got all of my resources, and I can create resources and do everything that I need to do in order to be able to learn Azure with the instructions that will be included at some point, yes, in this. Now, there's something I talked about at the beginning that I want to revisit right now, and that is that remember that we said don't launch your lab as, or don't mark your lab as completed until you've made sure that it has what you need. So at this point, I'm pretty sure that it's got everything I need. I click on end, and I say, yes, end my lab. My lab is closed. And if I bring this back up, there we go. Now I can go into my lab profile and actually say, yep, this is ready to go. It is now marked as complete. I do a save, and I'd be in good shape. So let's just revisit our slideshow here for 1 second. And I just want to review the process that we went through. We configured our subscription. You get a couple of pieces of information out of your Azure account. You set up a couple of permissions, and you get a couple of storage locations. You then connect that subscription to the subscription pool, or you follow what Robert suggested, which was to create the pool and then create the subscription right at the same time.
Yes.
Which is a handy way of doing it, and it's something that we're going to talk about with VM profiles and lab profiles tomorrow. You link that pool to the lab profile by editing creating a brand new lab profile, and then once you've done that, you set up your basic lab profile. You add the components that we talked about, a user and a resource group, and then you launch and test. And you will have a basic Cloud Slice that uses just a small component of a overall Azure subscription in order to give people an environment that they can learn Azure in.
And then for the final step, you get to soccer practice on time.
You get to soccer practice on time. And speaking of soccer practice, we want to thank you for being in attendance today at this session, and also for Launch 2018 Q1. And we are going to be back tomorrow bright and early, and these videos will be available online. Don't forget to tweet at the hashtag #ADV for advanced developer, and you will be able to use that hashtag to be able to send us information with questions or information that you want to see. And check out our website, learnondemandsystems.com. And any final thoughts from a color commentary?
Nope, just make some awesome labs.
Make awesome labs. That's a great, well, except Corey doesn't like the word awesome. So make awesome labs. Thank you very much. Have a great day.